This week's episode is sponsored by ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. I personally love ZocDoc because I've been using it for years. I told you that my primary care physician, my dentist, my psychiatrist, most doctors that I talk to on a regular basis, I have found through ZocDoc. And my primary care physician, she's amazing. She's helped me with my allergies and now I can breathe. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/shower to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/shower. ZocDoc.com/shower. This week's episode of Schauer Thoughts is sponsored by Headspace. Headspace is the app that helps me and 100 million people with their mental health and well-being with guided meditations, mindfulness practices, breathing and calming exercises, and so much more. I am reducing stress, boosting my mood, and sleeping better. I love their meditation exercises. The thing is, I tried meditating in the past, but I never understood the mechanics of it or why it's important to be mindful. Also, I have ADHD, but with Headspace, I'm getting it. Feel good and mean it when you say it. For a limited time, get Headspace free for 60 days. Go to headspace.com/shower. That's HEADSPACE.com/shower to unlock all of the Headspace free for 60 days. Headspace.com/shower. Hi guys, this is Schauer Thoughts with Sarah Schauer. This is going to be a podcast episode on anti-intellectualism, which is perfect because Schauer Thoughts is a podcast for left and right brainers. Now, I know that, the logical side and then the more creative, intuitive side of the brain has been largely debunked, but there is, one is dominated by the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. However, both are available on both sides. Anywho, if you're creative, if you're more logical, if you're just here, you got a brain stem, right? You just kind of are prioritizing and getting through today, then this is a podcast for you. We're going to talk about anti-intellectualism, and now I have divided it into two types of anti-intellectuals. And the first one that we will be talking about today, there is hope. And I know there's hope because I think I might have been one of them. After reading the fine print of anti-intellectualism, I wasn't opposed to learning. I guess, being in a drunken stupor for 10 years, you're not intentionally opposed to learning and growing. You're kind of just in an altered state of consciousness that doesn't allow you to develop. And the alcohol will really, really impact your brain. But before we get into that, we're going to warm up as you do with every shower. I hope you guys are cleaning or driving or just relaxing, doing something. We're going to mull over some things, we're going to consider, we're going to ponder. But what's some good things that happened to me this week? Now, this may not seem like a big deal if you're not a sapphic. Last night, I saw a lesbian who had the best arms I've ever seen in my entire life. When I tell you, I was like Dean Pelton from Community. I wanted to drop. I did drop to the floor, and I can't explain further what I did. Don't worry, I made no sound. But I saw them, and they were leaning against a counter, and you could, arms outstretched, and then they were kind of doing that thing where they stretch their shoulders. You could see every single muscle in their arm, right? Cut off t-shirt, and they also had a cropped t-shirt, but it wasn't too cropped. It was they were leaning forward, and then you could see an inch of skin, and it was incredible. I felt like I wanted to be like Paul Revere in that second. I wanted to find a horse and ride it through LA and tell everyone I know that there's good news. The lesbians, they're here. They exist, and you're like, well, aren't you a lesbian who exists? Yes, but you don't understand. When you see a jacked lesbian in real life, it's transformative, You're like, where have you been? Obviously they're usually in the gym or at their job or, wherever. But I saw them and I was like, oh, I just burped. But when you feel hope for the first time, it's like seeing someone with their own cultivated aesthetic, they're clearly expressing themselves and they just kind of exist. And you just want to be like, oh, thank God. oh, thank God. Because there's this whole like, obsession with being nonchalant and like flat affect. And as an autistic person who's not normally like this I do put on a face for the cameras because I want to be engaging. And, but when I unmask, it's pretty flat affect. And so flat affect is not necessarily a bad thing. But, seeing someone be expressive and genuinely themselves out in public, I feel like, oh, yes. It's like seeing an adult on rollerblades. You're like, oh, we are moving forward. Someone gives a shit to express themselves. But it was so good. I wish I could draw. I would have like drawn them from memory. And you're like, just seeing one lesbian with really great arms made you feel this way. You don't understand. Just their pants were nice. They had like a nice belt, like shoulder length, curly hair, just great arms. And tattoos. And I was like, oh my, okay, sorry. I feel like Dean Pelton. I was like, Dean from Community when he's like, he sees Jeffrey in sunglasses and he's like, he drops to the floor and he's like, even his shadow is sexy. That was me. But the thing is I was just admiring from afar. And I obviously didn't approach. I looked like crap at the time. And, the thing is you don't want to bother someone who's, I couldn't. But we're going to talk about anti-intellectualism. That was my good news for the week. I've also been reading a book that I am absolutely obsessed with. It's called Attention Beyond Mindfulness by Gay Watson. And it talks about like, Western and Eastern philosophies of like, attention and mindfulness. Obviously, it includes like Buddhism and stuff like that. And it's just so fun. Like I was reading, in the West, we base our experience of reality off of perception, which is like, how you see the world. And then they were talking about in the East, I think that he was specifying China. He said a reality is kind of experienced through respiration, which was so cool, right? Because the thing is with the West, right, a very individualistic culture, right? Individual, like one single, like, data point, blip, 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 blip. Like with your eyes, you can close them, you can look away, you can ignore stuff, right? But with your breathing, you can't stop. It's a continuous flow, right? It's just so cool. And then like how it's all like coming together and you're like, Sarah, all last episode was you talking about a book that you supposedly loved, and then it ruined it at the end. I understand that, guys, but I'm obsessed, and I started a new type of annotating that's just so cool, and everyone's like, dork, nerd. I'm sorry, but I got into like the neuroscience of attention. It is so cool. My God, wait. Yeah, it talks about like self-projection and like in time this self develops the ability to shift perspective from the immediate present to past and future scenarios. This process called self-projection entails the self being mentally projected into an alternative situation. The sense of self develops through the process of memory of the past and prospection, self-projection into the future. Thus the autobiographical or narrative self is formed. And so like you're like you cut off a whole bunch of like buildup. And yes, and so I did want to do a podcast episode on this sense of self because someone asked me that on TikTok, and that is such a wonderful question. Because the thing is we talk about like self-respect, self-worth, like self, all this stuff, but sense of self is like basically your position, understanding of yourself in the world, like internally and externally. And so when someone says they don't have a sense of self or they feel kind of empty, it means that they kind of lack an internal identity. And this book is so cool. I love it. But we're going to talk about anti-intellectualism. Watch me push that to the table and then I need it in like 2 seconds. Now, the thing is, I feel like I must warn you guys ahead of time. So there are 2 types of anti-intellectuals. And the first type is the one that does have hope, right? And so I will be making a case for these people. And I think that that's fair and they deserve it. Everyone deserves the right to a trial, right? Because not the devil is in the details. The details have been seriously overlooked. So I'm going to do a reframe and then I'm going to collect us all on the same page. And then tomorrow when I record, when it comes to the other group of anti-intellectuals, we're going to go all in. We're going to go all in. So if you're like, I want to yell at some people, tomorrow well, next week. But I hope you're all having a good one. I hope you all see jacked lesbians if you are not one. And if you are a jacked lesbian, I hope you know that I value you deeply. And lesbians in general, sapphics in general, humans in general, and if you kind of express yourself, God, that's incredible. I look forward to seeing all of you out and about. It's so good to see someone who's just themselves. You're like, I need to light a cigarette. Thank God. All right. The rise of anti-intellectualism. All of these resources will be linked. And now we are going to get into semantics today because that does matter. Actually, yes. Okay. So everyone, anti-intellectualism refers to a skepticism or disdain for intellectual thought and those who embody it, or often manifesting as a belief that educated individuals and critical thinkers are out of touch with everyday life. Okay. Now, I did do some keywords because here I love to talk about emotions and what they mean. Okay. Keywords: skepticism, disdain, belief, out of touch. Out of touch meaning lacking awareness or sympathy. Sarah, did you just talk about attention beyond mindfulness and how, okay, it has to do with awareness, right? And the thing is that you can, I should have talked more about the book, right? I just get into it and then I'm like, okay, the thing is with shortening attention spans, or if you have a hard time, remaining attentive, that's totally understandable. But the thing is like, focused attention, focused positive attention can help build compassion and empathy and sympathy. So we talked about, like with the male loneliness epidemic, focused, positive in listening and awareness, paying attention to what people are saying, right? Really internalizing it without judgment will help you build the skill of, empathy and sympathy. It can be built, okay? Okay, historically, this sentiment has fluctuated rather than following a linear trend, with notable peaks during specific social and political climates, such as the early 1950s in the U.S. amidst McCarthyism. Now, McCarthyism is the political practice of publicizing accusations of disloyalty or subversion with insufficient regard to evidence, and the use of methods of investigation and accusation regarded as unfair in order to suppress opposition. Now, I guess you could say, now here's the nuance with cancel culture. Its efficacy, we can all debate that, right? And then the thing is with a lot of people canceling when someone has done a moral transgression, right? They've done an actual no that they should be punished for. I get it. And obviously do that, right? But when it comes to conventional transgressions, right? Like someone's just a little bit weird. You make everyone try to hate someone for being weird, or like they misspoke one time and now they're the worst. It kind of mirrors McCarthyism. There is nuance, right? But yeah, this is back in the 50s with the civil rights movement, right? And, every home has like a TV, right? And so the spreading of information, and now the media is starting to spread like misinformation a lot easier. And so, they're kind of like dogpiling on people they don't like. So continuing, intellectuals, often seen as scholars, artists, and educators, strive to analyze and address societal issues through research and critical inquiry. In contrast, anti-intellectuals may prioritize practical knowledge over critical thought, favoring common sense approaches and often viewing education, particularly in the arts and humanities, with skepticism. Now, this is my key point. They prefer practical knowledge over critical knowledge. And I am going to make a case for them because practical knowledge goes with concrete language and critical, thought goes with abstract language. Now, and I'm only, okay. Also, common sense, good sense and sound judgment. The information and the feeling must be congruent. They must be symmetrical, right? For things to actually genuinely make sense, okay? So in contemporary society, concerns about rising anti-intellectualism have emergence, like last podcast. Okay, with discussions around the declining pursuit of higher education, diminishing interest in the humanities, and a growing acceptance of misinformation. Oh my gosh. So declining pursuit, much like happiness must be pursued, right? Less energy, diminishing interest, less want, less desire, growing acceptance of misinformation. You know what? I don't really need the facts of the case. I'm just gonna accept that. So critics argue that anti-intellectualism poses significant challenges to addressing complex global issues, as innovative thinking and informed discourse are essential for progress. Yes, they are. So understanding this dynamic can provide insight into ongoing debates surrounding education, culture, and societal values. Yes. So with me today, I have a book that I have referenced before. It is called The Knowledge Illusion: Why We Never Think Alone by Stephen Sloman and Philip Fernbach. Look at the sheer amount of tabs on this bad boy. I have read this thing front to back. Oh my God, it's like a children's Bible at a sleepaway camp. Oh, we got the fun verses. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer yourself as living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. It's your spiritual act of worship. Do not be, and then they give me like a little sweet tart, and they're like, Sarah, you did good. And I'm like, I stayed up all night memorizing one verse. Okay. So
you want a fun fact?
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, is it really loud?
Sorry, that was so loud. Yeah,
I
just
sorry.
quoted the Bible, and then a voice appeared from the sky. God.
Sarah.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I turned it down. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Sorry. That just made me think of when I was a kid. I was in a memory verse bee in my children's church, where for like a month I memorized like 20 memory verses, and then did them in front of the whole, like it was a competition in front of the whole church, and I won a bike.
Oh my God.
So I just want to one up you. Sorry.
That's incredible. Wow. I got sweet tarts. You got a bike.
Yeah, I got a whole bike.
Well, you know what? You live and you learn. Okay.
I'm so sorry for giving you a heart attack.
You're totally good. No, that's I'd meet Jesus if I had a heart attack, and I'd ask him.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. And he'd be like, "Oh, we don't, oh, yeah, Rebecca did well, but you did well as well. Because if all sins are equal, then all memorization of scripture is equal." And I'll be like, "Thank you, God. Hear that, Rebecca down there?" And you'll be like, living your life because you don't even realize that
Because I'm not dead.
Yeah, you're not dead. You beat me again.
Got you again. I'll be riding around my little bike. I'll be like, wonder if Sarah's dead. I don't know.
You have like a little pinwheel and like a top hat, and you're just on your bike. La-di-da-di-da-di-da.
That's how I live my life.
Yeah. This week's episode is sponsored by ZocDoc. As we all know, or I hope you all know, I just found out that I have horrible allergies to cats and likely springtime allergies. But I was kind of sneezing. My eyes were always watering. I thought it was maybe my lash glue. And then I went to my primary care physician, who I found through ZocDoc, and she told me that I have horrible allergies. But she's going to refer me to a specialist because I have had prolonged exposure to cats, and also I did raise 9 cats last summer. So she thinks there may be some histamine issues, but I did find her through ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. I personally love ZocDoc because I've been using it for years. I mean, I told you that my primary care physician, my dentist, my psychiatrist, most doctors that I talk to on a regular basis, I have found through ZocDoc. And my primary care physician, she's amazing. She's helped me with my allergies, and now I can breathe. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/shower to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/shower. ZocDoc.com/shower. This week's episode of Schauer Thoughts is sponsored by Headspace. Ever had this conversation? You meet someone, they say, "Hey, how you doing?" And without thinking, you say, "I'm good." You? Well, I decided when I say I'm good, I'd like to mean it. I don't want to lie no more. That's why I'm using Headspace. Headspace is the app that helps me and 100 million people with their mental health and well-being with guided meditations, mindfulness practices, breathing and calming exercises, and so much more. I am reducing stress, boosting my mood, and sleeping better. Headspace combines scientifically proven benefits of meditation and mindfulness with modern practices, and you learn from experienced meditation teachers. The app has customized, personalized approaches to help you navigate through all of life's
life's moments, big and small. If you're a total newbie or have been meditating for years, there's always content for what you're going through. Whenever I use it, it feels like it's made just for me when I'm short on time. Headspace has these quick on-the-go programs that help me get in the right headspace in just a few minutes. Plus, with over 1,000 hours of mindfulness exercises, it's got the most complete meditation library I've seen. So I can always find something that works for me. Oh my gosh, I am so excited. Okay, I am literally reading a book on mindfulness right now. And so and then with Headspace, I love their meditation exercises. The thing is I tried meditating in the past, but I never understood the mechanics of it or why it's important to be mindful. Also, I have ADHD, but with Headspace, I'm getting it. And like, there's the logic to it and also just feel good and mean it when you say it. For a limited time, get Headspace free for 60 days. Go to headspace.com/shower. That's HEADSPACE.com/shower to unlock all of the Headspace free for 60 days. Headspace.com/shower.
Okay, so the knowledge illusion. These are quotes from the book, and then I'm actually just going to read directly from the book because there's an example I'd like to give. Also, I was feeling some allergies this morning. I found out I'm allergic to cats, and when you have several, that kind of puts a lot into place. I just thought that I smoked too much. No, I can't breathe. You know what? And the thing is you're like, why don't you go to a doctor? I have medical trauma. My mother is a doctor. Going to doctors is scary for me, so I need to build up the courage. And also, when you smoke, you're like, oh, all these problems are because I smoke. It's also because you have allergies. But I'm getting it. So I took my allergy medication this morning. So if I seem a wee bit out of it, I am trying to stay awake. If it weren't for this Vyvanse coursing through my system, I'd be out like a light right now. Turns out, no, that's not true. All right. So the knowledge illusion. Public opinion is more extreme than people's understanding justifies. As a rule, strong feelings about issues do not emerge from deep understanding. They often emerge in the absence of understanding. So if you feel very, very strongly about something, unless you're like a expert and you know what is being said is like unequivocally wrong, then yes, you'd get like pissed off. But usually if, you hear something and strong feelings kind of arise first, that's a cue to slow down and then let the logic approach, right? Emotions sprint forward and then logic is coming up the rear. Let her get there too, It's like the tortoise and the hare. Let the tortoise get there before you start speaking. Yeah. There's also a phrase that I wrote down, make it make sense. Confusion is now my favorite emotion to think about. Confusion and being perplexed. When confusion is secondary and perplexed is tertiary on the emotions wheel. And so whenever you think or whenever you feel confused, that is not a signal to add more emotional input. That's actually a signal that you need more logic. You need more information to ground you, okay? If you feel unstable, uncertain, confused, unsure, then that is not a call for more emotion to be added. That's a call for sense to be added, okay? And, you need more logic in that moment. So beliefs, knowing, cognitive labor is it's all shared, right? So when I'm talking about like the knowledge illusion and anti-intellectuals, right? They have these like beliefs that like intellectuals are bad, but the thing is why it's so hard to, kind of get rid of people's like harmful beliefs is because they're supported by the community. It's a web. And so if you undo one belief, you undid one knot, but there's still a whole bunch of other knots. And the thing is that the community is constantly adding to that knot. So, why we never think alone is because, we're social creatures and, in group versus out group. So we want to be supported and included, and our identity is wrapped up in the group. And, with identity comes, beliefs, desires, attitudes, language, customs, culture. So there's just a whole bunch, right? So beliefs are hard to isolate. This leads to groupthink when members of the group can reinforce one another's sense of understanding, leading everyone to feel like their position is your attitude, is justified, and their mission, objective, is clear, transparent. Now, the reason why I keep putting these little words next to all these other words is because, okay, so anti-intellectual attitudes, right? Members of the group can reinforce one another's sense of understanding, leading everyone to feel like their position. So their group attitude is justified, which is reasonable, right? So they believe that they're being reasonable, and their mission, which is what they're trying to achieve, is clear, transparent, right? Now, clarity means that the emotion and the logic lines up, right? So they think they have it all figured out, and the group agrees. And even when there's no real expertise to give solid support. One common finding is that when people of like minds discuss an issue together, they become more polarized, black and white thinkers, and that leads to herd mentality. So yeah, the more you like go over this misinformed belief with your friends who share the misinformed beliefs, you guys start to, rile each other up. And then now the belief is getting hardened, and there's more to the knot, so it's hard to undo. So the illusion of explanatory depth enables people to hold much stronger positions than they can support. However, thankfully, we're going to make a distinction with our first group of misinformed people, and we're going to talk about opinions based on outcomes or consequences. Now, this group of people, they are probably the people that we need to reach. Actually, they are the people that we need to reach out to the most. The people where it's going to be incredibly hard to talk to them are people with opinions based on morals or sacred values. So this thing that I'm about to read is about about how we can talk to people with opinions based on outcomes and consequences. Okay? This just turned into a book club. Okay, yeah. So in this book, I'm going to talk about an experiment. We asked participants whether they supported or rejected various policies that were hot button issues at the time in 2012. Some of them were whether there should be a national flat tax, whether there should be a cap and trade program on carbon emissions, whether there should be unilateral sanctions on Iran, whether the retirement age for Social Security should be raised, whether there should be single-payer healthcare system, whether there should be merit-based pay for teachers. Now, feel free to remember most of those. I just wanted to give you an example of what they were testing for. As in the standard procedure, we first asked people to rate their understanding of an issue on a scale of 1 to 7. Next, we asked them to provide an explanation of all the effects that the policy would lead to. For instance, the instructions for the cap and trade issue read, please describe all the details you know about the impact of instituting a cap and trade system for carbon emissions, going from the first step to the last, and providing the causal connection between the steps. Providing the causal connection, okay? Finally, we again asked them to rate their understanding of the issue. As in most experiments of this kind, participants were pretty bad at generating explanations. With very few exceptions, they simply had very little to say when we asked them to explain how a policy worked. They didn't know the mechanics of policies in a way that they could articulate, and consistent with their inability to explain, they rated their understanding the second time lower than their understanding the first time. They showed an illusion of explanatory depth. Their attempt to explain the issue revealed to them that they didn't understand it as well as they thought they had. We conclude that just as people overrate their own understanding of toilets and can openers, they also overrate their understanding of political policies. Okay? And so when you make people explain their position on opinions based on outcomes or consequences, right? You make them do a causal explanation, right? Go like step by step explaining how, whether there should be unilateral sanctions on Iran. Take me step by step, okay? The thing is that you're asking them to explain, cause and effect, which goes down the system. You need to explain like this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, right? Okay? And so a lot of people, when they're asked specifics, right, you press them further, they realize, oh, I don't know as much as I thought I did. And so it takes them out of their belief system for a second, right? Because the thing is a lot of people probably, if Iran, they hear Iran and then they have this polarized opinion, right? They memorized, oh, I shouldn't like them or I should like them, And so then you ask them a policies question about Iran and they're already polarized. But if you get specific and you make them explain, cause and effect of whether there should be unilateral sanctions on Iran,
You've already lost most of them. The thing is now they're taken out of their belief system and they're like, oh, I don't know. And that's when you can start to kind of educate them and change their behavior. So I'm going to keep reading. Okay. So moving farther down, we found that attempting to explain how a policy worked not only reduced our participants' sense of understanding, it also reduced the extremity? I don't know why.
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Okay.
I think extremity.
Okay. So basically, and you're like, wow, Sarah, you're supposed to be educating us. Okay, so basically, when they realized they didn't know as much, they also got less extreme. And that's good, right? Because if a belief is highly polarizing, it's highly charged, right? You knock it down a peg. And if you knock it down a peg, you can slowly shift that energy somewhere else. If we consider the whole group together, the fact that people were on average less extreme means that the group as a whole was less polarized. After the explanation exercise, the attempt to explain caused their positions to converge, okay? So now, causal explanation may be hard, but it has a benefit beyond the opportunity to learn. The beauty of causal explanation is that it takes the explainers outside of their belief system. Imagine a new law that came into effect tomorrow that limited everyone's water usage in your region to allow 10 gallons a day. What consequences would arise in the short term? What about the long term? What would happen to real estate values where you live? What would happen to real estate values in regions close by? What standards of cleanliness would change? These are tough questions, but notice that the only way to answer them is to imagine a different world, one in which people use much less water, and to reason about what the world would be like. You have to think about your priorities. Would you wash yourself first, your clothes, or your dishes? But you can't focus entirely on yourself to answer the question. You have to think about how others would react and what would have to change, okay? So you give them this this immediate hypothetical with immediate consequences. And now they have to drop the script and be like, oh, crap, now I have to explain cause and effect. And then when they drop the script, they realize, oh, they didn't know as much as they thought they did about the original question. So that is the opportunity for change. Yes, generating reason rather than a causal explanation. Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay, so getting people to think beyond their own interests and experiences may be necessary for reducing their hubris and thereby reducing polarization. Causal explanation may be the only form of thinking that will shatter the illusion of explanatory depth and change people's attitudes. Okay? So when it comes to anti-intellectualism and it comes to people with opinions based on outcomes or consequences, they will respond and get less polarized to causal logic, and if you can decrease someone's attitudes, right, you can polarize, you just kind of take down the heat, take down the pressure, right? And now if someone has, if we get into the physics of it, the pressure is off, or, the altitude, the attitude pressure, right? Okay. At a higher altitude, no, you know what? Okay. Decrease the altitude, the attitude, and then that's a decrease in pressure, which means that there's a lower boiling point. So you need less heat, less friction, less strain between y'all to finally cook these nasty beliefs, okay? Now, that was a bit of a mouthful. If I lost any of you, that is totally fine. Repetition is the key to learning. I don't expect any of you to hear this first time and be like, I've memorized it, as that would be incredibly impressive, okay? I just want you to listen and learn a bit, right? Some of you could be doing the dishes and you're like, I missed half of that, and that's fine. You could go back and listen again, or, you're on your way to work and you're like, I'm getting out of the car, so I have to pause it right here. It's okay. We're all learning here. No pressure. We're good, okay? So now next week's episode is going to be on opinions based on morals or sacred values, because they rarely are based on reasoning. They're more based on feelings and intuition and community feelings. So those will be a separate one. So now I do have an example of, exploring the reasons behind refusal of vaccines. So this is anti-intellectualism, anti-science, and anti-vax. And I'm going to touch on anti-vax for the first example. Okay. So parents often refuse, delay, or hesitate to vaccinate their children. There are 4 overarching categories for vaccine hesitancy. The first 2, we're going to talk next week's episode. Religious reasons, personal beliefs, and philosophical reasons. Now, these 2 are safety concerns, desire for more information from healthcare providers. And those 2 are our opinions based on outcomes and perspectives. So, actually, I did write, the religious groups that usually do hesitate or outright refuse. Protestants, Catholics, some Muslim groups, Amish, and I think it has to do mainly with like observances and then also ingredients within vaccines, but I will get into that next week. So then I'm going to reframe how we approach anti-intellectualism when it comes to the outcome-based consequence group, okay? So the weight of knowledge, aka the weight of knowing, is very literal. Information is dense. If you've ever read Judith Butler or any sort of scientific academic research paper, right, it is heavy, okay? Because information is literally heavy. Now, this is just for fun. Density is mass over volume. But yeah, so, okay, if for anyone who doesn't understand the density, there's that age-old question, what's heavier, a pound of rocks or a pound of feathers? They're both a pound. However, rocks are much more compact, right? And so you can have much less rocks as opposed to much more feathers. That's not to say that a pound of feathers, if you have enough feathers in a bag, you could knock someone out. It would just take a lot more than a pound of rocks. And so this is where I'm going to reframe this. So, since information is heavy, let's translate this to the gym, okay? So, if you are speaking on a purely academic level, that would be like at the gym squatting 3 times your body weight, okay? Now, that took a lot of effort for you to be able to squat 3 times your body weight. Most people, read or understand at like a middle school level. If you were to just take that information without translating it, thus, not taking any, weights off the bar, and you were to throw that at someone else in the gym who only does 5-pound free weights, and they were supposed to catch that, they would immediately knock themselves out, right? The weight of information is literal. They would fall to the floor. They would be strained. They would be stressed. You can have psychic injuries. They can get injured, right? But more importantly, they're going to be scared of you, okay? If you threw a 450-pound barbell or weight at someone who does free weights, then yes, they will not want to go back to the gym. They will be scared, okay? So, if you're speaking at the academic level and, you're on a public platform like Twitter or TikTok and you have the intention to educate, right? Then you need to translate it down a quote-unquote weight class, okay? Actually, a lot. You need to take some 20-pound weights off either side of the bar. Actually, just hand them the bar, okay? And if you can't simplify what you're saying, then I think Einstein said something about that. Anyway, that you don't understand it well enough. But yeah, now if you don't want to educate and you just like to be a power lifter and, relate to other power lifters, then by all means. But don't include yourself in an anti-intellectualism conversation if you're going to be like, wow, everyone's too stupid to understand, and it's like, because it would be like going online and seeing trainers at the gym being like, wow, look at all these weaklings. God, they can't lift 450 pounds, even though I spent years to get to this level. We would consider them jerks. Now, in the anti-intellectualism discourse, right, if you're speaking at the academic level, you've trained, right? You've done weight training with your brain the entire time. And now people who have not because, okay, education is a privilege, and I know there's willful ignorance. We're going to talk about that next week. But some people who genuinely want to know, They're walking in the gym for the first time and they have like, I was going to say, their shredded gas station t-shirt on and their Crocs, because that's usually what I go to the gym in. And you're like, you can't lift 450 pounds. It's okay. Chill out. They're not going to want to come back. So reframe, right? If you're like, why aren't people getting this? Look at the weights that you're lifting. Why can't they lift those weights? Well, they can't yet. We just got to be supportive. If you're going to be a trainer, you got to be able to spot people, you got to be encouraging. Actually, a little bit of gym etiquette would help in anti-intellectual spaces. But yes. So I'm going to talk about information density. It's the amount of meaningful or useful information contained within a given amount of data or space. Volume. Meaningful or useful. Mass. Contained within a given amount of data or space. Volume. Density. We have fun here. High information density, a text, image, or data set with high information density delivers a large amount of relevant, meaningful content in a compact form. Each element contributes to understanding or knowledge without excessive filter or repetition. For example, a scientific abstract that summarizes complex research findings in a few sentences has high information density. So I do apologize. I do like to read a lot of research papers, and I know that some of you guys are the smartest smarty pants who ever did smart. But I think my casual listeners are like, and it's not saying that you're dumb. I'm saying that it's different. We're lifting different weights. I'm sorry. And that's not saying that you're incapable of lifting great weight. I'm sorry. It's a parallel that I lined up, and you're not weak or dumb. So low information density is a source with low information density may contain a lot of data or words, but much of it is redundant or irrelevant. For example, a verbose email with only one important point hidden with excessive detail would have low information density. You guys experience that on the regular with, this could have been an email. Yeah, because it has low information density. There's one thing that all y'all needed to know, but your manager wanted to call a meeting because they wanted to blow off steam. Steam, heat, emotion. They wanted to use y'all as shock absorbers. Meanwhile, you're just trying to like, what is the objective? That has low information density. There's also the quality of questions. The quality and relevance of questions or prompts can significantly impact the information density of a response. Now, why I'm getting into this is because the people who said, they have safety concerns or desire for more information. I'm talking to opinions based on outcomes, consequences. They said, and I'm taking them seriously, that they would like a practical explanation. They want a practical solution. So I am giving you guys a practical solution to how to talk to these people and address them. And I'm going to explain that by best practices, what they want, how to approach, okay? Because a lot of people, and the reason why I feel like I can actually speak on this is because I do this all the time. This is my method. Exactly how I'm speaking right now is a lot of you have said, oh, you help me understand very like complex things. And it's like, yes, because you all have the ability, a lot of people have the ability to understand complex topics. You just need a reframe, right? And a reframe is just a restructuring. And to restructure something, you need to know the structure of it, right? You need to know the logic of it. You all are the art. I'm just the person who works at Michael's who does the frames, right? Oh, you want a reframe? Are we doing metal? We doing wood? Oh, you want a podium? I can do that. The thing is it's your art. I just want to help you display it in a way that fits your vibe. So, the development of concrete and abstract thinking patterns. Now, like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to anti-intellectualism, they said that they prefer practical over critical. Now, with practical, you have to use concrete language. And with critical thinking, you use abstract language. Now, abstract is a general overview, right? It's like concepts and ideas. Practical relates to objects, okay? So abstract thinking, defined as the ability to think about complex concepts and ideas without being tied to specific examples, experiences, situations, objects, and people. It is considered high-order thinking because it's more complicated than other styles of thinking that are centered around real-life facts and information based on data. Abstract thinkers can reflect on events and ideas as well as attributes and relationships separate from the real-life objects that share those relationships or have those attributes. Example of abstract thinking is using humor in conversations, right? Being hopeful in tough conversations, recognizing the value of things defined by what we place on them, right? Okay. So this is how you know that you're using abstract thinking. And I will go off on a little autism rant because there is a similar issue emerging online that kind of bugs me. Okay. So abstract thinking discusses something using metaphor or analogy, and it analyzes situations and comes up with creative solutions, notice patterns and relationships between objects, events, and processes, continue to explore options in a situation after we found a resolution, consider someone else's point of view, and predict something based on available information and other thoughts. Sarah, what could you possibly say that would bug you so much? Abstract thinking describes something using metaphor or analogy. Now, most cliches are rooted in metaphors and similes. That includes therapeutic cliches. So, a cliche are its expressions that either have a general meaning or have lost their meaning over time. These overused phrases do not provide a specific meaning or image. Some are idioms, where the figurative meaning of a group of words is different from the literal meaning, literal definition. Okay, so here are some Okay, I actually need to get on board with this. Here are some therapy cliches, which are abstract, okay? Your feelings are valid. It's okay to feel that way. I hear you. It gets worse before it gets better. So, this pertains to therapists online. Okay. Therapists online keep throwing around the term intellectualizer, which is a term that means a defense mechanism where individuals focus on the rational or intellectual aspects of a situation to avoid confronting uncomfortable emotions or feelings, okay? Now, why this is important to me is because I am autistic, right? And with autistic people, we are bottom-up processors. To speak at the abstract level is top only, right? And so autistic people need the granular step-by-step to build to the abstract level. Now, if you're a therapist speaking to an autistic person in only abstract therapeutic cliches, they are not intellectualizing if they're trying to put logic to what you're saying, okay? But I'm going to keep going. Cliches are heuristics. They are mental shortcuts or rules of thumb that people use to simplify judgments and decisions. It is true that some people intellectualize to avoid feeling their feelings. However, I say this all the time, acceptance is both happiness and sadness at the same time. It is the relief of clarity and the weight of knowing, right? You finally see things for what they are, and then the weight of knowing what things finally are, right? You feel relieved and then heavy at the same time. That is acceptance. To accept your feelings, you need a hard truth to anchor them, okay? If you are throwing out therapeutic cliches, which have almost certainly lost their original meaning, have you considered that the individual is attempting to pair, not avoid, feeling with meaning, aka wait, to see the truth, right? They want to accept their feelings, right? And so if you're speaking at the level of abstract, right, and they keep adding concrete facts, right, maybe it's not because they're trying to avoid their feelings. They are trying to literally pair the feeling with the logic so they can accept it and move on, right? You need logic, right? You need truth. You need facts of the situation, right? What's happening. Here's an example, right? How I explain disgust, So emotions have sensory input. That does not mean they can be reduced to their sensory input, but disgust, moral disgust happens because of smell. Smell has range, right? And historically, if some people haven't been able to bathe or have access to bathing, or, they lived in very cramped quarters, or they work very long hours, they may smell, right? And so that usually relates to people who are poor. So if you're smelling this group, right, and smell is a very powerful sense, you feel morally disgusted by them, which repels them away, and you feel above them, okay? You look down on them. You're disgusted by them, okay? And that's how you build, heuristics, mental shortcuts. And so that's how you go from level to level to explain different, emotions. And so a lot of times online, when therapists use therapeutic cliches, that is incredibly abstract. And so a lot of people are like, cool, I understand what you're saying. Here is some logic to what I think you're saying. And then sometimes online, those therapists interpret it as, oh, you're avoiding the feeling. No, they are trying to anchor the feeling in place with logic. Yes, some people do intellectualize to avoid their feelings. However, the autistic community and people with behavioral development issues, they need the sense of the situation, right? This is why I love social workers. I cannot stress how much I love social workers. Okay, so because feelings are a type of information, sensory information, but they are less dense, okay? If you want your words, your expressions, literally expressing yourself, and then, cliches are expressions, to hit harder, aka stick, you need to add more information, meaning, especially if the cliche you're using has lost all its original meaning. So it's ironic that therapists, professionals, have popularized a negative term about intellectuals when the anti-intellectualism conversation is taking off. That's why I bring this up now, right? We're talking about anti-intellectual attitudes. Now, here's an anti-intellectualizing attitude from intellectuals. And the thing is yes, right? Some people genuinely want to avoid their feelings or, the full truth of the situation they can't accept, okay? But sometimes people just need the logic of the situation to, they need the consequences, the object, the point, right? In order to accept the hard truth. Accept and move on, okay? So, yeah, herein lies the rub. Translation errors through lack of genuine understanding from both clients and therapists. You need to first listen to each other. Make sure we have a firm grasp on what the other is saying. To get a firm grasp, and this is why I love talking about breaking down phrases. To get a firm grasp, you must look for the concrete, the object of the discussion. You cannot reflect on ideas and events if you do not have the real-life object in your grasp, okay? There is no hope for anyone to understand the abstract level, the cliche level, the intellectual level, if no one builds them step by step up to that level, right? And level is very literal, okay? Abstract, we got math, and to just, give someone a math cliche and then be like, you get it, right? No, you actually need to go through geometry, algebra, trig, before we can actually, what? Like, no. Okay, so yeah. Now, that's not to say that people don't actually intellectualize to avoid their feelings. I'm too self-aware. The thing is most people don't realize what self-awareness entails. Like I said, a lot of people don't know self-worth, self-respect. To be self-aware, you must understand how others perceive you and feel about you accurately. Accurately most of the time. If you don't know genuinely how other people perceive you or feel about you, you are not self-aware. You are self-conscious. And I can include that. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. Oh my God, there's so many standards for everyone to abide by. Oh, you're self-conscious. Oh, the system beat you down and now you have a black eye. That's not, self-aware is not technically correct. And we could go into that with, sense of self. But yeah. So, and then expanding upon my point of like anti-intellectualism and then intellectualizing, a common cliche in therapy you hear from patients is, I feel like something clicked. So I'm going to do a concrete interpretation of I feel like something clicked. Something clicked is an idiom. It means something suddenly became clear, right? Or was understood, often after a period of confusion or effort. So like I said in the beginning, the relief of clarity, right? or was understood, weighed down after a period of confusion or effort, right? When you feel confused, you do not need more emotion, you need logic, okay? So if someone is at their therapy appointment and they say something clicked, it is not that they finally they finally felt their feelings. It's because they finally got the logic attached to the feeling that they were feeling, okay? If you ever hear a client say something clicked, that is saying they needed intellectual stimulation, okay? In order to accept their feelings, right? Something clicked does not pertain to just, oh, I felt happy and something clicked. No, I accepted a hard truth and then got the relief of clarity with the weight of truth and something clicked, right? Two things must connect. And they already have the feeling and now they're pairing it with sense. Okay. So yeah. I do have an example for every therapist out there. Actually, I did post this one time and a therapist said, how was I supposed to know that? And I said, first off, how is a question that is not abstract. That is concrete, right? Which means you need a foundational knowledge. How should you as a therapist acquire foundational knowledge? I would say, what school did you go to? That school. Okay, I'm sorry. I just, that was that one therapist specifically. I deeply respect therapists. I love them. I love the EMDR therapists. I love social workers. I love somatic therapists. Make sure they're accredited. Okay, so I'm going to explain in a concrete way why journaling is good for you. And everyone who's like, well, okay, so this is what I'm going to say. Okay. This is a lot of people. So we've all heard the cliche that journaling is good for you, right? And you're like, okay, cool, but why? I can explain the feeling aspect in terms of the central nervous system, but I'm going to explain the memory aspect in a way that's concrete that you can understand. Okay. Most people don't know how to study. They write copious amounts of notes, never review them, assume they know them, but fail the test. That's a bad thing in terms of tests, but an amazing thing in terms of journaling. And that is how the brain is wired. When you write down notes and assume you'll remember them, that's an encoding error. You're, quote, assured that the notes are encoded, however, they're on a, quote, external hard drive. If the notes stay in your brain and you continuously repeat them, ruminate, they will be easier to access, repeat, and, quote, learn from. And then that includes positive and negative learning. If you store the notes on an external hard drive, access is prevented. That leads to internal memory decay through retrieval failure and unconscious motivated forgetting, right? It's like when you wrote down notes and you tell yourself, I have it written down so I won't forget. You will. You assure yourself that you won't forget it because you wrote it down. However, it's on an external hard drive and that is separate from you. So your brain, there is retrieval failure. It cannot access what you wrote down. Our inability to study taught us how journaling can be used to forget hard feelings and thus help us heal. If you have ever studied and still failed a test, you can heal from trauma. That is the silver lining of our ever-shortening attention spans. By writing it down, right, you move the files from your internal hard drive to an external hard drive in a healthy way, close out the hundreds of tabs and programs overheating and slowing down, burning out your computer, brain, and then, once you've done that, unplug that shit. Do not reread what you just wrote down, and if you do, don't repeat it often, as repetition is the key to learning, right? Or revisit it a year later when the feelings that you transcribed have actually subsided, right? You separate the memory from the feelings. And like I mentioned with my, comedy episode, right? Comedy is an art form. However, you're on pain meds, so you've separated the message from the feelings, okay? Now, when the feelings with journaling, you've separated the message from the feelings, and now your brain is rest assured that the message is stored, and now the feelings get to subside, and your brain has kind of cut that out. Okay, that's why journaling is good for you. It's why you fail tests. Oh, you wrote it down. You think you memorized it. Oh, you're gonna remember it, and you failed it. That's why journaling is good for you. Helps you get all that shit out, and then we could talk about the ritual of burning it, and that's so fun. But yeah, journal to forget, much like you study and forget. So yeah, that's how you do a concrete explanation of an abstract cliche. Journaling is good for you. Why? Journaling is good for you for the same reason why a lot of people don't pass tests even though they wrote notes. Because your brain has an encoding error, and it's on an external hard drive. Okay. But yeah, that is my discussion of anti-intellectualism and how we approach and so you're like, that how discusses the process, how we should, approach talking to people about topics where they need more information or they genuinely do not understand. Okay? Now, if you're like, but I've talked to my family members. If you talk to your family members on a religious basis, we are not on the same page. That is next week. But I agree with you. It's frustrating. I was raised Southern Baptist, okay? So bridge the gap. Take sort of inventory of when you talk about things. Are you at a, Olympic powerlifting level? And if you are, take some weights off, translate it down. And by translating it down, you go from abstract, right, to more concrete, okay? And then, you can build up or build down. The issue becomes, do you actually know how the abstract thought is built? And that's another thing that I want to talk about with autism and skill regression. So if you memorize things, you don't truly understand the meaning, right? So with mirroring people, with autistic people, you memorize actions, what's okay, but then you stop mirroring people, and then now you're stuck at the abstract level, and you didn't understand the purpose for why most of these people do the things that they do. So basically all the floors kind of just fell away, and you're stuck at the abstract level, which will cause skill regression. And a skill must be, meaningful and, commitment to learning. But the thing is if you got there by mirroring, which is not the same as learning, it's memorizing, then you're going to be stuck at the top floor with no elevator and no kind of way to rappel down. And so now the skill regresses. But I could do a full episode on that. Yeah. And the thing is teachers, I'm not mad at you. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. You've been through so much. The thing is with rote learning and fucking No Child Left Behind, it's just memorize, push them through, right? Memorize. And the thing is guys, if you're learning and you're taking in a lot of information, you do also, your brain is not a muscle. It's fat, salt, water, carbohydrates, glial cells, and a couple more things. But you can build it like a muscle. So you need protein if you're going to be reading it a whole lot. You need a lot of protein, much like a gym bro. This also puts a new spin on theory bro, because they're like the gym bros of the academic world. Just shut the fuck up. You got roid rage, and now you're taking it out on people who like to read casually. Leave us alone. But yeah, so when it comes to first group of anti-intellectuals, there is hope. There is hope, guys. We just got to become better trainers, or not incorporate ourselves in anti-intellectual conversations if we don't want to help. Or, we just got to build up our own understanding so we can dismantle it and then kind of help build someone else up. Spot someone. Intellectually spot someone. If I love, that's one of my favorite things in the comment section whenever I post a thoughtful or engaging, more nuanced TikTok video, is that there's people in the comments who help each other out. That's so nice. Sometimes I'll say something and I don't see it, and then someone's like, wait, what does that mean in terms of this? And then someone's like, oh, that's such a good question. Oh, you're spotting them in the comments, and it just makes my heart because that's what I want, everyone can learn. And the thing is I totally understand when someone's being a total shithead, and they're obnoxious, And that's with your own discernment, right? And discernment I've talked about already, but like I trust your discernment. Is someone asking a genuine question, and then usually if it starts with why, if they're autistic and it starts with why, they're being genuine. If they're not autistic and it starts with why, that's most likely rhetorical. Be careful. And you're like, how do you tell if someone's autistic or not online? Go to their page. And I'm not saying like judge them. I'm saying usually there is like some allusion to autism, or like, well, that's what I've noticed. I guess maybe my audience posts more videos of themselves and they feel comfortable to. Oh, wait, no, they just, you know what? Be careful with why questions. How questions are always when someone wants specifics, okay? Because that's, concrete. Except for, how was I supposed to know? That's rhetorical. That's like so rude that you ask a rhetorical, concrete question. And how come? But they have to be like, usually they only ask that once they've already gotten really defensive. So you can but usually how questions are when someone genuinely wants to know. But yeah, so there is hope, right, to dismantle some beliefs, welcome some supposed anti-intellectuals into the intellectual fold, right? If you're a therapist and you got mad at me explaining, abstract versus concrete language, and you're like, wow, that was really condescending. This is an opportunity to put ourselves in someone's shoes. But I also love therapists and I appreciate them deeply. Attention Beyond Mindfulness by Gay Watson is a good book for therapists or anyone. It's so illuminating. And thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you all. And I have faith that you can learn literally anything you want. A lot of people think that they're bad at learning. But the thing is you learn a new song like every day, don't you? Or like, you learn people's names. The thing is when you put it through the lens of work or school, then yes, that's a polarizing lens. Polarizing, right? Now, if you take those lenses off, polarized lenses, then you can see, there's relief, there's clarity. You didn't really need polarized lenses. Anyway, but I'll get into that on next week's episode. But next week's episode, we can talk shit, we can fight. Some people don't want to be saved, and, willful ignorance, and then just ignorance, and yeah, like that's a different case. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Schauer Thoughts. I hope you have a good one. I hope you feel relaxed. If you have any questions, please let me know. If all the resources will be linked below. I know that I used a whole bunch of definitions and words, and so if you don't remember all of it or something didn't stick, it's totally fine. Repetition is the key to learning. This the first time or maybe the second time you've heard this. It's totally fine. You're good. And I can't wait to see you at the powerlifting competition. I don't know. I was trying to be helpful. But all right. Thank you guys. Bye. Wait. Not bye. Like and subscribe on YouTube. And then rate me 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Now bye.
Wait, you're bi now?
No. But I love the buys. I love you guys.